She learned the meaning of humiliation on a rainy Thursday morning, standing barefoot on the cold marble floor of a hospital corridor where hope usually walked in whispers. Aisha Rahman clutched the thin file to her chest like it was the last fragile proof that her life still mattered. Inside were scans, reports, signatures, every page screaming urgency. Outside, the hospital buzzed with indifference. Nurses hurried past. Orderlies pushed stretchers. Somewhere a child cried. Somewhere else a life was being saved. Just not hers. Next. The voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Aisha stepped forward, heart pounding, palms damp. She had waited 6 hours already. 6 hours sitting on a hard plastic chair, watching people who arrived after her get called in first. 6 hours replaying the same thought in her head. Please just let him see me. She entered the office. Dr. Zion Ashcroft didn't look up. He was seated behind a massive desk of polished black wood, scrolling through something on his tablet, jaw set, expression carved from stone. The man was legendary, cold, brilliant, untouchable. The youngest head surgeon the city had ever seen. The man who never lost a patient. The man who never wasted time. They called him the machine. Yes, he said flatly, eyes still on the screen. Aisha cleared her throat. I'm here about my surgery. My name is Aisha Rahman. I was told. He finally looked up. And in that single second she knew. His gaze flicked from her worn shoes to her plain dress, to the cheap fabric of her headscarf, and something unreadable, but unmistakably dismissive, passed through his eyes. Your file, he said. She hurried forward and placed it on his desk, hands trembling. Dr. Ashcroft opened it, skimmed the first page, then the second. His brow furrowed, not with concern but irritation. This surgery is elective, he said. Her breath caught. No, sir. It's not. If I don't have it soon, the condition could worsen. The pain. I've read the report, he cut in. You're not in immediate danger. She swallowed. With respect, doctor, the cardiologist said. I am the head of surgery, he said, voice dropping, eyes sharpening. I decide what's urgent. Aisha felt heat rush to her face. Please, she whispered. I've already waited months. I don't have. Insurance? He interrupted. Silence. Her hesitation was answer enough. Dr. Ashcroft leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Then I'm afraid you'll have to wait. How long? She asked, barely audible. He glanced at his schedule. Indefinitely. The word hit her like a slap. I'm in pain every day, she said, tears burning behind her eyes. I can't work properly. I can't sleep. I just need a chance. He stood. The meeting was over. Next patient, he said, already turning away. Aisha stood frozen, the room spinning. She wanted to scream. To beg. To collapse at his feet if that's what it took. Instead, she picked up her file and walked out. In the corridor, her knees buckled. She sank onto the floor, hugging herself as sobs finally broke free. No one stopped. No one asked. She was invisible, just another poor woman with a problem that didn't matter enough. She didn't know that this moment, this humiliation, was only the beginning. 3 days later, Aisha stood in a completely different building, wearing a dress she didn't choose, surrounded by people who didn't care how she felt. The marriage hall glittered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers. White roses imported from overseas. Soft music played in the background. Everything screamed luxury. Everything except her heart. Smile, her aunt whispered sharply. People are watching. Aisha forced her lips upward. She was 24 years old, an orphan since 16, drowning in medical debt, and about to marry a man she barely knew, because she had no other choice. Dr. Zion Ashcroft stood at the altar. Impeccable suit. Perfect posture. Expression unreadable. Cold. When their eyes met, there was no recognition. No flicker of memory from the hospital corridor. No sign that he remembered the woman he had dismissed like an inconvenience. To him, she was just another obligation. The officiant spoke. Words about commitment and unity floated through the air, hollow and meaningless. Aisha's mind screamed. This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was. When the vows were done, Dr. Ashcroft didn't kiss her. He simply offered his arm, formal and distant, like a businessman concluding a deal. Because that's exactly what this was. A deal. The arrangement had been explained to her in brutal clarity. Her late father had once saved the life of Dr. Ashcroft's mentor. A debt had been owed. When Aisha's situation became desperate, medical bills piling up, eviction notices looming, someone had made a call. Marriage in exchange for security. Her surgery. Her debts cleared. A roof over her head. No love required. No emotions expected. Just obedience. Life with Dr. Ashcroft was a study in silence. The house was enormous, modern, and sterile, like a museum where warmth wasn't allowed. They lived in separate wings. Ate at separate times. Spoke only when necessary. To the world they were the perfect couple. To each other they were strangers. Aisha learned quickly that respect in that house was conditional. She wasn't a partner. She was a responsibility. He came home late. Left early. Rarely looked at her. But he noticed things. When she flinched in pain climbing stairs. When she skipped meals. When her hands shook while pouring tea. Still he said nothing. Until the night everything broke. It happened during a charity gala. The kind where rich people wore empathy like jewelry. Aisha stood beside her husband, smiling politely as donors praised Dr. Ashcroft for his brilliance, his dedication, his humanity. "You're so lucky," a woman said to Aisha, "to be married to a man like him." Aisha smiled. Dr. Ashcroft sipped his drink, detached. Then the pain hit. Sure. Crushing. Stealing her breath. Aisha staggered. "Zion," she whispered, fingers digging into his sleeve. He frowned. "Not now." Her vision blurred. "Please." He looked down at her, really looked this time, and saw the color drain from her face. The room tilted. She collapsed. The hospital erupted into chaos. Monitors beeped. Doctors rushed. Nurses shouted instructions. And for the first time in years, Dr. Zion Ashcroft felt fear. Real fear. "Prep or two," someone said. "We need immediate intervention." Zion stood frozen. The chart was in his hands. Aisha Rahman. His wife. The woman he had dismissed. The woman he had married out of obligation. The woman now fighting for her life. "She needs surgery," a resident said urgently. Zion's eyes scanned the details, and his blood ran cold. This was the surgery he had canceled. The one he said could wait. The one he had denied her. "I'll do it," he said, already pulling on gloves. But then he stopped. Across the hall, another patient was being wheeled in. A child. 8 years old. Critical condition. No other surgeon available. 2 lives. 1 choice. The room went silent. Everyone looked at him. Dr. Zion Ashcroft, the man who never hesitated, stood paralyzed between duty and consequence. And then, he made the decision that would change everything. The operating room lights burned brighter than guilt. Dr. Zion Ashcroft stood motionless in the middle of the corridor, the sterile scent of antiseptic thick in the air, his mind split in 2 directions that refused to reconcile. On one side Aisha. His wife. The woman whose pain he had dismissed. The woman whose surgery he had postponed with clinical detachment. The woman now unconscious, her heartbeat unstable, her life slipping through a narrowing window. On the other side, a child. 8 years old. Blue-lipped. Barely breathing. Brought in from a low-income neighborhood after collapsing at school. No parents present yet. No backup surgeon available. 2 lives. 1 operating table. 1 decision. "Doctor," the charge nurse said carefully, "we need an answer. Now." Zion closed his eyes. For the first time in his career, statistics didn't line up neatly. Protocols didn't provide comfort. Experience didn't silence the doubt. This wasn't a case study. This was karma standing inches from his face. "Prep the child," he said. The words fell like a gavel. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone else nodded and rushed away. "What about Mrs. Ashcroft?" another doctor asked, hesitant. Zion's jaw tightened. "Stabilize her. I'll come as soon as I can." He turned and walked toward the pediatric ward, each step heavier than the last. Behind him, Aisha lay unconscious, unaware that once again her life had been placed on hold. The surgery lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of controlled movements, precise incisions and mechanical focus. On the outside, Dr. Ashcroft was flawless, steady hands, sharp commands, perfect execution. On the inside he was unraveling. Every beep of the monitor echoed with Aisha's face. Her quiet voice in the gala. The way she had clutched his sleeve. The trust in her eyes when she collapsed. Trust he hadn't earned. When the child's heart finally stabilized, the room exhaled. "She's going to make it," the anesthesiologist said. Applause broke out softly. Relief washed over the team. Zion didn't join in. He ripped off his gloves and rushed out. Aisha's condition had worsened. "She's crashing," a nurse said as he burst into the room. "Her blood pressure dropped 10 minutes ago." Guilt slammed into him like a physical blow. "Why wasn't I called immediately?" he snapped. "You said," the nurse hesitated. You said to stabilize and wait. Zion didn't respond. He was already scrubbing in again, hands moving automatically, heart pounding violently in his chest. This is my fault. The thought repeated with every heartbeat. He had been taught to detach, to separate emotion from action, to treat bodies not souls. But lying on that table wasn't just a patient. It was the woman he lived with, ate beside, ignored, benefited from. The woman who had endured humiliation for his sake. The surgery was brutal. Complications surfaced quickly. Scar tissue. Inflammation worse than expected. Her heart struggled against every intervention. Zion worked like a man possessed. Stay with me, he muttered under his breath, though she couldn't hear him. Please. Don't do this. Time stretched. Sweat soaked through his scrubs. His hands trembled for the first time in his career. Doctor, a resident whispered, panic creeping in. We're losing her. Zion's vision blurred. No, he said hoarsely. We're not. He adjusted, corrected, refused to let go. Minutes passed. Then, a steady rhythm. The monitor stabilized. She was alive. The room sagged with relief. Zion stepped back, chest heaving, hands braced against the operating table. He had saved her. But the victory tasted hollow. Aisha woke up to pain and silence. Her throat was dry. Her body heavy. Machines surrounded her, their rhythmic beeping the only proof that time was still moving. She turned her head slowly. Zion sat beside her bed. Not standing. Not distant. Sitting. His elbows rested on his knees, hands clasped tightly together, head bowed like a man in prayer. He looked broken. Aisha, he said when he noticed her eyes open. Her name on his lips startled her more than the pain. You're awake. She tried to speak. What? Don't, he said quickly, reaching for her hand. Please. Just listen. She didn't pull away. I almost lost you, he continued, voice low and unsteady. And the worst part is, I earned that fear. Her eyes burned. You canceled my surgery, she whispered finally. The words weren't angry. They were exhausted. Zion flinched as if struck. Yes, he said. I did. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. I judged you, he went on. I saw your file, your clothes, your insurance status, and I decided you could wait. A tear slid down Aisha's temple. I begged you, she said softly. I know. His voice cracked. And I didn't listen. The great Dr. Zion Ashcroft bowed his head. I'm sorry, he said. Not as your husband. Not as a doctor. As a human being who failed another. Aisha turned her face away. Apologies didn't erase pain. They didn't erase humiliation. They didn't erase the fear of being disposable. News spread fast. By morning, the hospital buzzed with whispers. He canceled his wife's surgery. He chose another patient. He almost lost her. Some praised him for saving the child. Others questioned his judgment. For the first time in years, Dr. Ashcroft's reputation wasn't untouchable. The board called for a review. Colleagues avoided his gaze. And for the first time in her life, Aisha saw power shift. 2 days later, Zion made another decision. One that shocked everyone. He submitted a formal request to step down temporarily from his position. I need time, he told the board. Not to rest. To learn. To learn what? One member asked skeptically. How to see people, he replied. Aisha was discharged a week later. She returned home not to silence, but to change. The sterile house felt different now. Zion cooked. Poorly. He insisted on helping her walk. On listening when she spoke. On asking before assuming. He attended her follow-up appointments, but sat beside her, not above her. One evening, as she rested on the couch, she finally spoke the question that had been burning inside her. Why did you marry me? She asked. Zion didn't answer immediately. Because it was convenient, he said honestly. Because it settled a debt. Because I thought emotions were liabilities. And now, she asked. He looked at her, really looked at her. Now I know that arrogance nearly cost me everything. Aisha studied him carefully. Pain had humbled him. But humility still needed to be proven. Outside the house, consequences were building. The child Zion had saved? Her family went public. They spoke about the surgeon who chose compassion over convenience. Meanwhile, another family spoke up too. A woman in a headscarf. With canceled surgery records. With proof. With a story the media couldn't ignore. And suddenly, the man who once decided whose pain mattered was about to be judged by the world. The first headline appeared at dawn. Elite surgeon under fire after canceling wife's life-saving surgery. By noon it was everywhere. Screens in hospital waiting rooms. News alerts buzzing on phones. Whispered conversations in cafes and offices. The name Dr. Zion Ashcroft, once spoken with awe, was now wrapped in controversy. Aisha saw it before he did. She was sitting at the breakfast table, sipping tea carefully, her chest still sore, when her phone vibrated again and again. Messages from distant relatives. From former co-workers. From people she hadn't spoken to in years. Is this true? Are you okay? I'm so sorry. Her hands trembled. Zion entered the room moments later, tie in hand, already sensing something was wrong. What happened? He asked. She turned the screen toward him. He didn't need to read past the headline. His face drained of color. So it started, he murmured. You knew this would happen? Aisha asked quietly. Yes, he said. I just didn't know how fast. The hospital board moved swiftly. Zion was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His access badge was deactivated. His surgeries reassigned. The man who once walked those halls like an untouchable god now stood outside them like a stranger. And for the first time he understood what Aisha had felt that day in the corridor. Powerless. Disposable. Invisible. Public opinion split violently. Some called him a hero for saving the child. Others called him a hypocrite for denying his wife care. Talk shows debated ethics. Comment sections burned with rage. So poor patients can wait, but rich galas get his attention? If she wasn't his wife, she'd be dead. This is what privilege looks like. Aisha stopped reading after the first 100 comments. The weight was too heavy. I never wanted this, she said one night, sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't want revenge. Zion stood in the doorway, unsure if he was allowed closer. I know, he said. But justice doesn't always ask permission. She looked at him sharply. Is this justice? She asked. Or humiliation? The question cut deep. Because for years, humiliation had been something he delivered, never something he endured. I don't know, he admitted. But I deserve whatever comes. Then came the knock that changed everything. 2 weeks after the scandal broke, a woman stood at their door. She was in her late 40s, eyes sharp, posture firm, presence commanding without effort. My name is Nadia Rahman, she said. Aisha froze. Rahman? She repeated. Nadia smiled faintly. Your mother's younger sister. The room went silent. I thought, Aisha's voice shook. I thought you were gone. I was, Nadia said. For a long time. They sat. And slowly truths unraveled. Nadia had left the country after a family dispute years ago. She had built a life abroad. Built power. Built influence. She had been watching. I saw your name in the news, Nadia said, eyes flicking briefly to Zion. And I came home. Aisha's hands clenched in her lap. Why now? Because, Nadia said calmly, someone finally treated you the way they always treat people like us. Zion stiffened. Nadia turned to him fully. You judged her, she said, not angrily, factually. You saw her scarf, her finances, her silence. And you decided she was acceptable collateral damage. Zion didn't argue. I did, he said. And I will regret it for the rest of my life. Nadia studied him for a long moment. Good, she said. Regret means there's something left to work with. Aisha stared between them, stunned. The reveal came 3 days later. Nadia Rahman held a press conference. The room was packed. I am the founder and chairwoman of Rahman Global Health Initiative, she announced. We are one of the largest private donors to public hospitals across 3 continents. Murmurs exploded. 10 years ago, she continued, I made a promise to fund institutions that believed in equal access to care. That promise will now be tested. She paused. Effective immediately, our foundation will suspend funding to any hospital found guilty of discriminatory practices. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. And somewhere behind the scenes, hospital boards panicked. The investigation accelerated overnight. Records surfaced. Patterns emerged. Canceled surgeries. Delayed treatments. Patients without insurance pushed aside. Not just by Zion. By many. But his name became the symbol. The man who represented everything wrong, and everything that could change. At home, Aisha sat in silence, processing the truth. All this time, she whispered, I thought I was alone. Zion knelt in front of her. You were never alone, he said. I just failed to see who stood beside you. She looked at him then, not as a husband, not as a doctor, but as a man stripped of his armor. Why are you still here? She asked. After everything. He swallowed. Because walking away would be easier, he said. And I don't deserve easy anymore. The board summoned him again. This time the room felt different. Not powerful. Afraid. We need a statement, one member said tightly. Public accountability. A gesture. Zion nodded. I'll give you one, he said. But not the one you expect. That evening he stood before cameras. No suit. No polished image. Just truth. I canceled the surgery because I believed I could, he said. Because I believed my time was more valuable than someone else's pain. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was wrong. He inhaled deeply. I built my career on excellence, but I neglected empathy. And excellence without empathy is cruelty in disguise. The silence was deafening. I am stepping away from all surgical privileges until I earn back the right to serve. A reporter shouted, why? Zion didn't hesitate. Because the woman I underestimated showed me what it means to be human. The camera cut to Aisha. And for the first time the world saw her not as a victim, but as the center of the storm. The world didn't slow down after the confession. It accelerated. Hospitals across the city scrambled to review policies. Boards held emergency meetings. Administrators suddenly remembered words like equity, dignity, humanity, terms that had long gathered dust in mission statements. And at the center of it all stood Aisha Rahman. The woman who had once sat crying on a hospital floor now received invitations to speak. At first she refused. I'm not a symbol, she told Nadia. I'm just someone who was hurt. Nadia nodded. That's exactly why they need you. The first public forum was held in a university auditorium. Aisha almost didn't go. Her chest tightened as she stood backstage listening to the crowd murmur. Doctors, students, journalists, administrators, people with power. People who once would have walked past her. Zion stood a few steps away, not beside her, behind her. I won't speak unless you promise something, she said quietly. Anything, he replied. You don't defend yourself, she said. Not today. Not ever. He met her eyes. I won't, he said. This isn't my story to center. She nodded. Then she walked onto the stage. Silence fell. Aisha gripped the podium, breath steady, voice calm. I was denied surgery, she began. Not because I didn't need it, but because I wasn't considered urgent enough. She paused. I was polite. I was quiet. I was respectful. And I was invisible. The room shifted uncomfortably. I don't believe most doctors wake up wanting to hurt people, she continued. But systems teach you who matters. And if you're not careful, you start believing it. Her eyes scanned the audience. I survived, she said. Many don't. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her voice didn't waver. This isn't about revenge. It's about change. The applause was thunderous. Zion watched from the shadows, chest tight, humbled beyond words. That night, something inside him finally broke. He sat alone in his study, staring at his hands, the hands that had saved lives and dismissed others. What am I without my title? He wondered. The answer came quietly. A man learning how to be decent. Weeks passed. Zion volunteered, not in operating rooms but in clinics where no one recognized his name. He cleaned instruments, filed paperwork, listened, really listened. Patients spoke freely to him, unaware of who he once was. And for the first time he understood medicine without power. One evening, Aisha found him on the floor of the living room, surrounded by old medical journals. What are you doing? She asked. Relearning, he said simply. She sat beside him. You don't have to punish yourself forever, she said. I know, he replied. But I need to be worthy of forgiveness before I ask for it. She studied him quietly. You never asked me, she said. I know, he said again. Because forgiveness isn't owed. Silence wrapped around them, heavy, honest, healing. The hospital board delivered its verdict a month later. Zion would not return as head surgeon. His license would remain under review. But there was an alternative. A pilot program. A new surgical unit focused on underserved patients, funded by Rahman Global Health. Run by doctors who proved not just skill, but character. They wanted Zion to apply. Do you want this? Aisha asked when he told her. He shook his head. I want to deserve it, he said. Whether I get it or not. The night before his final evaluation, Zion couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony, city lights stretching endlessly below. Aisha joined him, wrapped in a shawl. Do you regret marrying me? She asked suddenly. He turned, startled. No, he said immediately. I regret the man I was when I did. She nodded. I didn't marry you because I loved you, she said. I married you because I was desperate. I know, he said softly. But somewhere along the way, she continued, desperation turned into truth. He looked at her, eyes searching. What truth? That people can change, she said. But only if they're willing to lose everything first. The evaluation day arrived. Zion entered the room alone. No reputation. No safety net. Just honesty. They asked him one final question. If faced with the same choice again, a panelist said, what would you do? He didn't hesitate. I would listen, he said, before deciding who can wait. The panel exchanged glances. Outside, Aisha waited. For the first time, the future felt open. The decision came quietly. No press release. No cameras. No applause. A single email arrived at dawn. Zion read it twice before it fully registered. He had been approved, not as head surgeon, not as a celebrated authority, but as a trial physician in the newly formed Equal Care Surgical Unit. Limited hours. Strict oversight. Zero tolerance. A second chance. He exhaled slowly and closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, success didn't feel like conquest. It felt like mercy. The clinic was nothing like the hospital he once ruled. No marble floors. No grand offices. No silent deference. Just crowded hallways, worn chairs, and patients who carried pain like a second skin. Here no one cared who he used to be. They cared whether he listened. The first patient he treated was a janitor with a failing valve, denied surgery for 2 years. Zion didn't rush. Didn't dismiss. Didn't assume. He explained. He asked questions. He waited. And when the surgery was approved, the man cried, not from fear but relief. That night, Zion went home and sat in silence. I think, he told Aisha, this is what medicine was supposed to feel like. She smiled gently. It always was. You just couldn't hear it before. Aisha's own healing took time. Not just her body, but her spirit. She joined Nadia's foundation, not as a figurehead but as an advocate. She spoke to patients, families, lawmakers. She told the truth. About being dismissed. About being invisible. About surviving anyway. People listened, because her voice carried lived reality. One afternoon, after a long meeting, she stood alone in the clinic hallway where it had all begun. The same corridor. The same cold floor. Only this time she was standing tall. Zion approached quietly. You don't have to come here, he said. I know, she replied. But I want to remember who I was, so I never forget who I am. He nodded, humbled. Months passed. The Equal Care Unit became a model. Other hospitals followed. Policies changed. Funding shifted. Training evolved. The ripple effect was undeniable. And slowly the world stopped calling Zion the cold-hearted doctor. They began calling him something else. A man who learned. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Zion knelt in front of Aisha, not out of desperation but intention. I married you once because I had to, he said. I stayed because I was afraid to lose you. She watched him carefully. But now, he continued, voice steady, I want to choose you, with nothing owed, nothing forced. He held out a simple ring. No deals, he said. No debts. Just us, if you still want that. Aisha's eyes filled with tears. You don't need to be redeemed to be loved, she said softly. But I choose you too. She took the ring. The wedding this time was small. No grandeur. No obligation. Just truth. Years later, a young woman sat in a hospital corridor clutching a file. Nervous. Afraid. Uncertain. A doctor approached her, not rushed, not cold. Come with me, he said kindly. Let's talk. The woman stood. Hope walked beside her.